Yumenglong's mother suddenly reveals shocking evidence that turns the entire case upside down. The courtroom had grown cold with the weight of judgment. For months, the world had watched in disbelief as the tragic story of Menglong unraveled. His sudden death, the web of lies, the high-profile suspects, the fiery trials, and the tearful vigils that shook China to its core. Everyone thought the story was over. Verdicts had been handed down. Sentences had been read. And yet, just when the dust was beginning to settle, the earth split open again. Because Yumenglong's mother, silent until now, rose from her seat and shattered the silence with evidence so staggering, so unimaginable, that it has left the entire nation reeling in shock. The unexpected return. No one expected her to be there. For months, Yumenglong's grieving mother had avoided the media spotlight, retreating to Urumqi in Xinjiang, where she buried her son with tears and songs of farewell. Reporters described her as a woman crushed by grief, too broken to step foot into the circus of courts and cameras. But on this morning she arrived. Dressed in a plain black qipao, her gray-streaked hair pinned neatly, she carried nothing but a small wooden box clutched tightly against her chest. As she entered the Supreme Court chamber, whispers rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. Journalists scrambled. And the accused, those already sentenced, stared in disbelief. The judge, already on the bench, paused mid-sentence. "Madam, he said softly. "You weren't expected." Her reply was simple, but chilling. "You may have sentenced them, but you haven't heard the whole truth." The wooden box. The courtroom fell into silence as Yumenglong's mother set the small wooden box on the evidence table. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried with startling clarity. "This," she said, tapping the lid, "is what my son left behind. Something none of you have seen. Something that changes everything you think you know." The lid creaked open. Inside lay a flash drive, sealed in a clear evidence bag, and a collection of handwritten letters tied with red string. Gasps filled the courtroom. Lawyers leaned forward. Judges exchanged wary glances. "These letters," she continued, "were written by my son weeks before his death. And this drive, this contains a recording of his final meeting before the night he fell." The entire room froze. The recording that shook the court. When the flash drive was plugged into the court's projector, the screen flickered to life. What appeared wasn't grainy, wasn't distorted. It was crystal clear. There was Menglong, seated in a dim cafe, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. Across from him sat two people whose identities had been hidden throughout the trial. The cafe's security cameras had captured every second. And then, like a knife cutting through glass, the conversation revealed words that silenced every gasp, every whisper, every cry. One voice, calm but sinister, leaned across the table. "You know too much, Menglong. You were never supposed to find out." His reply trembled. "I won't be your puppet. If the truth kills me, then so be it." The cafe blurred into chaos as the video showed one of the individuals sliding a small envelope across the table. Menglong shoved it back. Minutes later, the feed cut off. The implication was clear. He hadn't just fallen from that building. He had been silenced. The letters. If the video was shocking, the letters were devastating. Written in Menglong's unmistakable handwriting, each page revealed layers of fear, betrayal, and resolve. One letter, addressed to his mother, read, "If you are reading this, it means I didn't make it. Please know that I fought until the end. They wanted me gone, but I refused to bow. Protect my truth, mother. Do not let them bury me twice." Another letter, written for his fans, said, "You gave me light when darkness surrounded me. Don't let my story end here. Don't let the powerful erase me. Promise me you'll fight for the truth." By the time the letters were read aloud, even the judge's eyes were wet with tears. The court in chaos. The revelation ripped through the chamber like a bomb. Lawyers shouted over one another, the defense claiming fabrication, the prosecution demanding immediate investigation. Reporters stormed the aisles, shoving microphones and cameras toward Menglong's mother, who stood motionless, clutching her son's portrait now pressed to her chest. Spectators screamed. Some collapsed into sobs. Others shouted with fury at the accused. Monsters, one woman cried, pointing at the row of actors and accomplices. You thought you could hide it, but he spoke from the grave. The judge slammed his gavel, but the noise only grew louder, an uncontrollable storm of grief and rage. Outside the court, word spread like wildfire. By the time Yumenglong's mother stepped outside, thousands had gathered. A sea of candles and posters stretched across the courthouse steps, as fans and strangers alike knelt in solidarity. When she raised the letters high for the crowd to see, a chant erupted. Justice for Menglong! Justice for Menglong! The chant shook the skies, drowning out the honking of traffic, the wail of sirens, the chaos of cameras. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a movement. The accused trembled. Inside, the convicted sat in shock. For months, they had believed the storm had passed, that their carefully constructed lies had carried them through the fire. But now, with Yumenglong's own words and video evidence rising from the grave, their empire of deceit crumbled. One of them broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, begging to be moved out of sight from the cameras. Another whispered under their breath, "We thought no one would ever find it, but the world had found it, and there was no going back." Social media explosion. Within minutes, every platform exploded. Hashtags like #MenglongSpeaks, #TheTruthFromTheGrave, and #JusticeIsNotOver rocketed to the top of global trends. Clips of the cafe video circulated at lightning speed. Millions watched in disbelief, replaying the chilling exchange over and over again. Fans uploaded videos of themselves reading his letters through tears, promising to carry on his fight. One message stood out above all others. Yumenglong may be gone, but tonight, he is louder than ever. The mother's final words. As the chaos reached its height, Yumenglong's mother stepped before the cameras one last time. Her voice was hoarse, her eyes swollen, but her words struck like thunder. They tried to silence my son. But today, you all heard him. His truth lives on, and with you, it will never die. The crowd erupted, voices merging into a tidal wave of sound, carrying his name into the night sky. The case turns upside down. Legal experts immediately confirmed what the world already knew. This evidence was too damning to ignore. Appeals were filed. Convictions would be revisited. New charges would be brought against those who had thought themselves untouchable. The case, once thought buried, had been ripped open. What was once a closed chapter was now a blazing firestorm, one that threatened to consume the highest levels of power. And at the heart of it stood a grieving mother who had turned her son's death into an eternal cry for justice. The legacy. As midnight fell, millions across China lit candles in their homes. From Beijing to Shanghai, from Urumqi to Shenzhen, windows glowed with flickering flames. The nation mourned, but it also rose. Because Yumenglong wasn't just a fallen star anymore. He was a symbol, a voice that could not be silenced, a truth that refused to die. And as the world whispered his name, Menglong, 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 it was clear, this case was far from over. The fight had only just begun. The aftershock of the envelope. The courtroom had become an earthquake zone without tremors. Every gasp, every frantic whisper, every pounding heartbeat was proof that Yumenglong's mother had detonated a bomb with her revelation. The brown envelope still lay open on the judge's desk, its contents scattered like shards of glass. Photos of the banquet, shadowy figures shaking hands, hidden signatures linking millions of yuan to foreign accounts. But the most haunting artifact was that phone recording, Yumenglong's trembling voice confessing to his mother that his life was in danger. That voice had not just broken the silence, it had broken the facade of the entire case. The actor's panic. Gao Taiyu, shackled but desperate, slammed his hands on the desk. "She's twisting the truth," he shouted, voice cracking under pressure. "That call, it's edited. It's fake." But his words fell flat. His fellow accomplices shrank into their seats, their silence screaming louder than his protests. One of them, Song Irin, buried her face in her hands. Another, pale and trembling, muttered under his breath, "It wasn't supposed to come out, not like this." The judge's gavel banged furiously. Order! Order in this court! Yet the harder he struck, the less control he had. The spectators weren't just watching a trial anymore. They were watching the mask of justice peel away to reveal something monstrous. The mother's stand. Yu's mother, though frail and visibly exhausted, refused to sit down. Her voice trembled, but carried a strange, unstoppable strength. "My son trusted me with this because he knew the truth would be buried if it stayed in anyone else's hands," she said, her eyes piercing the rows of powerful lawyers, officials, and defendants. "And now, I will not let his voice be silenced again." She raised a trembling hand toward the projection of the banquet photo. "Look at them, smiling as if the world belongs to them. But my son, look at his eyes. He knew. He wanted to run. But they trapped him." The camera zoomed on Yu's expression in the photo. The tight lips, the stiffness, the way his gaze wasn't on the champagne but on the exit door. The contrast between his unease and their joy was chilling. Gasps from the gallery. Someone in the public gallery screamed, "That's Minister Han," as the projection shifted to another photograph. Chaos rippled instantly. The man named was a high-ranking government official, his face unmistakable even under the dim lighting of the photo. Murmurs erupted. Why was he there? Why was he never mentioned in the investigation? Another voice whispered, "Isn't that the CEO of Hualien Media?" The dominoes began to fall in real time. The audience wasn't just shocked. They were connecting dots faster than the lawyers could scramble to suppress them. The recording played again. The judge, visibly shaken but bound by duty, replayed the critical section of the recording. Yumenglong's voice filled the room once more. "They're using Gao, but he's not the mastermind. He's just a pawn." This time, when the words echoed through the speakers, everyone turned to Gao Taiyu. His face drained of all color. He tried to look defiant, but his shaking hands betrayed him. His own accomplices stared at him in horror, realizing he had been marked not as a villain, but as a disposable tool. For the first time, the spectators saw not just guilt, but fear in his eyes. The judge's dilemma. The judge leaned back, his hands covering his face. He had presided over countless cases, but never had he seen one morph before his very eyes into something far larger than the law was prepared to handle. "Do you understand what this means?" whispered one clerk to another. "If her evidence is verified, this isn't just about murder anymore. This is about treason. This is about entire industries." The judge's gavel struck again. "This court will adjourn temporarily for review of this evidence." But the damage was done. The fire was already raging. The mother's collapse. As the bailiff stepped forward to escort her out for safety, Yu's mother clutched her chest, staggered, and collapsed to the floor. A collective gasp swallowed the room whole. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Medics rushed forward, lifting her gently as her eyes fluttered shut. But before losing consciousness, she whispered, barely audible, "Don't let them bury him again." The words sent chills crawling across every spine. Was this exhaustion, or had her collapse been orchestrated? The thought alone electrified the courtroom with paranoia. Outside the courthouse, news traveled at the speed of lightning. By the time the court adjourned, crowds had already gathered outside the courthouse gates, holding candles, photographs of Menglong, and hastily written signs. "Justice for Menglong. Expose the shadows. No more lies." Helicopters circled overhead. Journalists shoved microphones toward anyone connected to the case. The air was thick with fury and heartbreak, and in the sea of protesters, some whispered of darker possibilities. If they could silence Menglong, who's safe? Prison reactions. Inside the holding cells, the convicted actors boiled in panic. Gao Taiyu threw himself against the bars, screaming, "I didn't want this. They forced me." His voice cracked with desperation, his reputation already crumbling into ash. Song Erin sat trembling in the corner, whispering repeatedly, "We were promised protection, we were promised," as if reciting a broken mantra. The 8 accomplices, once bold in their silence, now refused eye contact, as though haunted by the ghosts of what they had done. But the world outside no longer cared about their sentences. It was hungry for the larger truth. The global shockwave. International media picked up the story within hours. Major networks replayed the mother's evidence on loop. The banquet photo became the most circulated image in the world. Commentators debated endlessly. Was Menglong murdered to cover up corruption? Who else attended that banquet? Are we witnessing the fall of an empire? Celebrities, activists, and political figures began speaking out, demanding a full investigation. What began as a murder trial was now spiraling into a global scandal. The mother's awakening. Later that night, in a hospital bed under heavy security, Yumenglong's mother regained consciousness. Reporters camped outside, desperate for updates. When she opened her eyes, her first words were chilling. "They won't stop now. They will come for me too." Her statement, leaked by a nurse, spread like wildfire. Sympathy turned to rage. The public vowed to protect her, dubbing her the last voice of Yumenglong. And in the courthouse, the judge faced the impossible. Would he dare reopen the entire trial, not just against the convicted actors, but against the faceless powers Yumenglong had named?